All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with Andrew LaCombe. Most of you know him from TV6 News. Andrew, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, first and foremost, I guess, how are you holding up with all this coronavirus craziness?
Taking it one day at a time, and every day is different, which that's how it is in my job all the time, I guess. But right now, especially, some days are kind of quiet, which kind of has an eerie feeling, But right now, it's just one day at a time. We had to, you know, like today, it's been a month since like the restaurants and bars closed. I think that was like a big kind of a big moment that
For
Monday
sure.
that all happened. And right at the beginning, our company was very um, ahead of the game as far as getting people out working remotely. I mean, we had our building almost cleared out, from the beginning, getting people at home. Um, our technology team had everyone, set up pretty quickly, and so I was thankful that our company's based in Atlanta, and so I
Hmm.
think they're a little more ahead than others, and
Sure.
so it happened fast, but now it seems like it's been the same thing for a few weeks, which is,
Right.
I think, okay as far as workflow goes, not okay as far as excitement.
Right. So obviously the vast majority of people pretty much just know you from what they see on TV. So a lot of the purpose of this interview is to kind of get to know a little bit more about you, the behind the scenes, I guess you could say, or get to know your story a little bit more. So you were born and raised in Marquette, correct?
Yep, I grew up in South Marquette as I went to Superior Hills Elementary and all the way through Marquette Senior High School and graduated in 2008. So yeah, definitely Marquette is home.
Marquette is home. Okay. So when you think back on like growing up in Marquette, like what sticks out in your head?
I think just the amount of time we spent outside
Hmm.
was huge. I mean, we lived in a neighborhood where we'd always be out riding around on our bikes and, hanging out with other kids in the neighborhood. So that was, I think, whether it was winter or summer or anything in between, we were always at the park or on the trails or doing something outside. So I didn't grow up with much like, video games or TV or anything like that. We were very outdoorsy. My brother and sister are relatively close in age to me, so we were, doing stuff together a lot of the time.
Sure. Now I know one of the themes or things that kind of is a big part of your story is music. Was that something that was always kind of a part of your life, even from a young age?
Yeah, both my parents' sides of the family had some musical talents in them, and so then my sister in fourth grade, she started playing violin. We had a good after-school program uh, at Superior Hills, and then she played violin, and so I kind of just followed. Said I played cello, and that kind of just took off from there. It was very everything just kind of fell into place as far as the musical opportunities because we had so many of them that just one came after another, and before I knew it, it was one of the biggest parts of my life.
Speaking of opportunities through that, is that how Camp Waggaman kind of came into your life? I know that's something that you and I share in common is
Yeah,
that camp.
yeah. So that was one of my best friends. She started going to the camp, and like a lot of those summer camps, you get your other friends to go, and
Hmm.
I, was able to go a couple summers. I only went for a couple summers when I was growing up because I started going to more music camps. But then this friend Heather, she also then worked at camp, and you also like you try to get your friends to go to camp when you're kids. You try to get your friends to work at camp when you're in college. So that's what happened, and now it's still a huge part of my life.
That's really cool. I've got a lot of fond memories of being there, and it's cool to kind of see like people keeping it going and new generations kind of taking advantage of that. That's definitely neat to see. Um, to circle back a little bit to kind of working in broadcasting, I found it interesting when I was kind of looking up your bio, that at a young age you participated in a media program at the Children's Museum, right, in Marquette.
Yep, and that was, I think, my second grade teacher knew about the program at the time. It was called Children's Express, and it was a program. The Children's Museum was pretty much brand new at the time, and so I joined the program then when I was 8 years old, and that was an incredible opportunity to, work on a team of other kids who were interested in asking questions and being just curious about things that were going on in the world. It was stories we wrote for the newspaper and the radio, that were by kids but for everyone. So about kids issues that we wanted everyone to know about, and that was, um, you know, I got to go travel to many places. I went to, Washington D.C. I went to a couple of political conventions and interviewed, you know, senators, governors, all
Oh,
kinds of
wow. Very cool.
people about kids issues, and that was, that like fueled my passion for journalism from age 8 all the way through 18 when I graduated high school.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that the program was that in depth. So we'll give a quick shout out to Nina, who's been on the podcast. So that's a pretty cool story. You also had an aunt that worked at the TV station, right?
Yeah, so that was another connection, I guess, to the TV world I had. My aunt worked in production at TV6 when this is when I was probably like 5, 6, 7 years old, and so she a few times would take me to work to her job, and I'd sit in the studio and watch the newscast live. I'd get to meet Carl Bonack and Steve Asplund and Mike Ludlum, Greg Trick, all these guys that now I work with.
Right.
Uh, and I would get Carl's old weather maps, Steve's old news scripts, and I'd put together like newscasts at home, for my grandparents or my parents or my aunt and uncle, to make them sit and listen to me read the news. So I was, practicing that from the beginning as well.
That's super cool. Um, to fast forward a little bit, so when you finish high school, you ended up heading down to Lawrence, down in Appleton. What led you there?
One of my really good friends in high school who played violin, Danny Samandel, she went to Lawrence, and that's the only place I would have known about it was from her. It was a very small music conservatory, liberal arts school, like 1,400 kids in downtown Appleton, and like most people from the UP who had been to Appleton, many times growing up to go to the mall or go to the hotels, go out to eat, whatever. But I never knew there was a college there, a university there. So eventually I got to check out the university, and I fell in love with, well, the the size of the school was great because for a music school especially, I think you want to be in a small controlled environment where you're
Hmm.
living close to where you're going to class and all that stuff. The cello professor was incredible. The orchestra was great. So I was applying for colleges, to either study meteorology or just news broadcasting. And
Hmm.
then in the middle of my senior year of high school, I just kind of had a moment where I realized if I want to study music intensely, this is the time to do it.
Hmm.
So I auditioned at Lawrence and another school, and I had to choose between the two, and I picked Lawrence. And I was extremely happy that I did that because those were 4 uh, special years for sure of just being around high class musicians and teachers, and learning, getting so much better at my cello.
And I know you also got a minor in government. Would you say that your experiences from the program where you headed out to DC and were involved in that side of things, do you think that led to you kind of having that interest later in life?
Yeah, 100%. That was, I had a passion for like political reporting and finding out what was going on as far as uh, the workings of government, whether it was new legislation or different policies that were already in place. And so I got a government minor and kind of knew in the back of my mind I could use that government minor to get an internship in at a TV station. And because Wisconsin, this was when the Scott Walker recall
Yep.
was just starting, and so there was a ton of interest, kind of renewed interest in local politics, state politics. So I used that political, the government minor to get an internship at a TV station, which then kind of led me back to TV6.
That that's a perfect transition, because that
Yeah.
was kind of my next question that I was going to ask you, is how you kind of made that transition into the newsroom. So you did an internship at a NBC affiliate in the area, right?
Yep. I went to Green Bay 3 times a week and got to be a big part of their newsroom for about 3 months, and which was a super hands-on internship. I got to write stories and go out with reporters and do some of my own stories too. And so I got to really see what I thought I would like to do, growing up, doing working in a TV newsroom. I got to actually do it, and I saw that, yeah, this is what I want to do, um, with keeping music part of my life as well.
Very cool. So I know you ended up basically coming back around 2012 to work for TV6. So can you walk me through how that really happened? I mean, was it like there was a job opportunity that you just applied for, or were you approached or recruited to come back? I mean, how did that all play out?
Yeah, it was just a job posting that I responded to, and I think enough of the management knew who I was there, but the person who ultimately hired me had no idea who I was. But I put together a resume tape like everyone else, and explained I'm from Marquette. I would love to come back home and do the news in Marquette, and so it worked out. I got hired. I actually had to finish college a couple of weeks early and get up to Marquette, and I started in late May of 2012 and on the morning shift. So I went from being a college student who I had to lifeguard, I think maybe 2 mornings a week at like 7 a.m. And that felt like the earliest, like impossible thing ever. And then all of a sudden I was waking up at 2 a.m. to be on live television every morning. So it changed quickly. But I took the opportunity to come back home and have a job and really got to do a bunch of different things in my first stint at TV6, that lasted about a year.
Yeah. Um, so earlier we had talked about, when you would go to the station with your aunt when you were younger and you're seeing Steve Asplin and Greg Trick and Carl Bonack and all these guys. So was it nerve wracking at all for you to all of a sudden now you're working with those guys that you kind of grew up like seeing on TV and being around?
Yeah, and it was strange in a way because a lot of those people worked at night, and I was working the morning shift, so I wouldn't see much of them. But
Sure.
I also grew up eventually. Vicky Crystal became one of the main members of the TV6 news team, and I knew her a little bit off and on, growing up. And so then all of a sudden, I was working with Vicky like 100% of my day, and of course, she was like a legendary face of Upper Michigan. So that was cool that, just to like work with her every day. And she was kind of, um, at the beginning when she was hired to work on the morning news, it was pretty much just her. The
Hmm.
team slowly grew in the morning over time. And so eventually she had more people working with her. So it was cool to work with someone who used to basically do it all. And then slowly the show expanded and their responsibilities expanded. So they'd hire more people.
Yeah, that is really cool. Um, so you mentioned your first stint at TV6 basically kind of lasted about a year, maybe a little over a year. Then you ended up jumping back down to Green Bay, correct?
Yep. Yeah, so I was at TV6 and I was liking it, but there weren't many opportunities at that time to kind of to grow into different, being a reporter, is extremely difficult in a small market where you're shooting all your own video, editing everything. The days are long. You can drive anywhere across the UP in a day and come back, and it's a long, exhausting, kind of a burnout job sometimes. And so I looked for a place where I could, work in a bigger newsroom, with a little bit more resources. And so I interviewed in Madison and Green Bay, and ultimately picked Green Bay, just because I had gone to college in Appleton and knew Green Bay pretty well. And it just kind of, I walked in, I did an interview at Fox 11 in Green Bay, and it just kind of felt like the perfect fit for me. Like the people that I talked to in management, and just the atmosphere of that station. Just I kind of thought, this is what I need to do. I kind of knew this is going to work, and it did. And I was there, I got there, I was 23, which sometimes I think like, how did I do that as a 23-year-old?
Yeah.
Um, but I started there, and that kind of grew. I grew into a political reporter position that gave me some incredible experiences.
Well, and I know you're a really big Packer fan, so
Yeah.
kind of a win-win, having
Yeah.
having Lambeau Field basically right in your backyard, right?
Yeah, well, the station is right on Lombardi Avenue, so you could
Yeah.
you could park there for games, go and tailgate, go to the game, maybe leave your car there, come back to work Monday morning, and you're set to go, right?
Right. So so as you're working there, as a basically a political and investigative reporter, obviously politics is a very tumultuous topic. I think more so now probably than when you were working there, so to speak. But did you enjoy kind of immersing yourself into that world more than what you were doing with like your morning show?
Yeah, just because you could dig into big issues. And, some of my stories that I put together, like on the investigative political side, would be like a 9-minute piece on television, which is really hard to get 9 minutes of TV time as a reporter. But I got the chance to dig into issues and really, find out what was going on, how the decisions were being made, what the process was, you know, putting it to light for the average person to see. So that was extremely, I think, unique for someone with relatively limited experience that I had at that point.
Hmm.
But I got to, I'd interview Governor Scott Walker all the time, all different lawmakers at state and federal level that were tied into Wisconsin. And so it was a really a chance to just, give people both sides, be fair to everyone, and just really get in depth on these issues that generally don't get as much TV time as they should.
Yeah. I mean, there were quite a few notable people that you were able to interview during your time there, right?
Yeah, so probably the craziest week I had was when, remember the primary season of 2016, when there's both major parties are trying to figure out their nominee, and it was late March at that point, and it was down to uh, President Trump now, John Kasich, and Ted Cruz, and Wisconsin was like going to determine a lot. So I interviewed. All of a sudden, it was like Monday morning. Trump's attention became Wisconsin, and so and his campaign was so non-traditional that I think I just found an email address, emailed them, and said, "I'm a reporter in Green Bay. I'd love to interview Mr. Trump." And within like an hour, I think I got an email back like, he's going to call you in at 10 o'clock. And I think I was out on a story somewhere else, and I'd like rush back, and he just called the newsroom, and you know they transferred the call to the phone booth, as we called it, the audio booth, because we had no time to set anything else up. It was just a phone interview.
Yeah.
And we just recorded that, and that started a crazy week. I talked to him a couple times. I talked to Senator Ted Cruz, John Kasich, Bernie Sanders. It was a wild week and a long week, but that was just something I'll always remember, is getting to talk to these people and ask them the questions that Wisconsin voters hadn't really heard, because the way that primary process went, they would focus on one state at a time, or a couple states, and kind of ignore the other ones that were upcoming. And then you got bombarded in a week with all the candidates.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. I mean, it was kind of, the way you're describing it is kind of a, like a rapid fire type of thing. But I suppose when you're working in politics, a lot of times that ends up being the case. So if you could sit down and interview anybody, who would you want to sit down and interview?
Wow, I've never thought about just one person. Yeah, I don't know I don't know. I mean, if it was like right now in today's
Yes.
climate, I would say probably Anthony Fauci.
Okay.
You know, I think he's holds a lot of knowledge and some of the thinking of what's going on. I mean, I've interviewed the president before, again, since that first time, but I mean, right now, obviously, he holds a lot of the power and of what's going to happen here with our situation. So I'd say one of those two right now.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't mean to throw you off your game.
Hey,
I'm
that's all
just,
right. That's a pretty common question that I guess I've probably asked people that before, but I've never been asked that myself.
yeah. The tables have turned. Okay,
Yes.
so 2017, you end up making the jump back up to the UP. What ended up prompting the move back home again?
I knew there was an opportunity at TV6. Someone who had positions in the newsroom, and there was a morning anchor position open now. And so I knew that I wanted to get back to Marquette. I would come to Marquette probably every weekend for, most of the summer. Sure. I knew I had friends that were, going to have weddings through the summer and start having kids. And my family was here, my mom and my brother and stuff. So I was here all the time. So I kind of figured it's time just to actually move back and see if this is where I could be for like the long term.
Sure. So I know that when as part of everything, when you move back, with now being like the assistant news director, what goes into your job off camera? Because I think most people just see you on TV and probably think, okay, like that's your job. But what goes into the backside of things?
Yeah. So my day, I get there at 3:00 every morning. The newscast starts at 5. I get there at 3. And by the time I get to, there's already 2 or 3 other people in the newsroom at that point who've been working since midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. on getting the newscast produced, as we call it. So writing stories, editing video, getting new information. If there's stuff happening overnight, we'll make phone calls to different, agencies and other parts of the region too. So do a lot of that. Those 2 hours fly by. All of a sudden, it's like time to go. Like 4:50 is when I get up from my computer and put my tie on, do my makeup very quickly, fix my hair, and 4:58 sit down at the desk, and then the newscast starts at 5. So the first half of the day just flies by, and the newscast goes by generally pretty quickly too. I mean, we're moving all over the place. We keep it pretty fast paced in the morning, and we have live shots most of the time, and guests coming into the studio at least once a morning. So it flies by. And then by 7, I'm halfway through my morning. I was joking, I eat lunch at 7 a.m. when most people aren't even still awake. And then I kind of move into phase 2 of the day, which is when I'm doing more like the management stuff, planning out stories for reporters, working with, follow-ups from the night before, whatever happened, after in the afternoon before, what else we need to do today to kind of catch up and get ahead. And then trying to, work with reporters one-on-one and getting them some feedback and, critiques to make their work better, because inevitably a lot of our reporters come in, work at TV6 for a couple of years and then move on to a bigger market. And that's just kind of the way the industry works. And that's the way it has. And I know some people always, kind of complain about that. Like, oh, we get used to someone and they move on. But, that's just kind of the business of TV is people are always moving on, trying to get a lot of people come here, that we get people from all over the country who move to Marquette for their first reporter job. They want to get back home, just like I did. So, we know they're not going to be here in most cases for more than 2 years. So we just give them, we ask a lot from them, try to give them a lot of opportunities when they're here, and hopefully it's a good place for them to live. And so that's basically my day. Is the second half of my day is working with our news team. First half is working on the morning news.
Sure. So you just mentioned kind of, I don't want to say a revolving door of anchors, but people that come from out of the region, they work here for a while and then they kind of move on.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is really kind of cool or interesting is that just from running in kind of overlapping or similar circles to you, I know that you and that kind of crew of people that work for the station, you guys stay in pretty good contact with each other, even as they move on to different jobs and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think, you find out that when you first start at TV6, and probably for most TV stations, you find out the cool places that people who have worked there are now working. we have reporters all over the country in Houston and Pittsburgh and some major markets that are doing some awesome things. So you kind of like get, become part of something that, a good legacy of successful reporters. And so, obviously the people that you work with at the present time, you definitely feel a connection with because you're working long days, hard days. A lot of those people don't know anyone. They become friends with their coworkers because they moved to a random town. But then after you move on, you stay in touch because people are doing cool things at their jobs, whether they're in TV or not. They're definitely a good group of people to stay in contact with and reminisce and
Yeah, it's almost kind of like reunions.
yeah,
That,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
We've had reunions. I know it's when it's someone's wedding.
Yeah.
The TV6 crew is there, and you kind of flash back to the Saturdays at the doghouse when that was the hangout spot,
Right.
and, and that continues now with the current crew of the first who are on their first job. There's
Yeah,
definitely something special that you kind of bond with those people.
that's really cool. Um, do you think that you're at a little bit more of an advantage than say those people from out of the area because you're born and raised here in the UP? I mean, do you look at
Oh,
that as more of
yeah.
a positive than a negative?
Yeah, I mean, I can pronounce Baraga on first sight, so that's like a huge advantage from the beginning. And then, there's plenty of other words too. And just knowing kind of, what it's a unique place. We know what do people value, what are they willing to do, what are they not willing to talk about, why do people enjoy, people from out of the area might like watch a TV6 newscast and be like, all you had was a bunch of fundraisers and community events, and it's like, but that's what people are used to seeing, and that's what they want to see. They want to see their neighbors on TV and their kids, what happened at their kids' school today, or another UP school. We're used to that. We're used to getting a well balanced newscast of the good in the world and the serious news we have to report, but it's not what people expect, I guess, probably for these people coming from outside of the area. And so I think it takes a learning curve to be like, this is a story. I'm doing a story on this small event, the Trinary Outhouse races. Like, what is what? But it's like, oh, that's the biggest deal in the whole month of February, and for part of the UP. So, there's so much that we know is unique about the UP, and that reporters get pushed right into that. And I think most people embrace it. People are super friendly usually to us when we're out on a story, and so they know that most of us aren't from here, and so the locals are always very helpful. They want TV6 reporters to get a good story and get a good representation of what's going on.
Speaking of locals, when you're out and about not on the job, do people stop you a lot and chat with you and recognize you?
Yeah, and probably 90% of the people say you're not that tall on TV, which I am 6'6", which I don't look that tall on TV. Also, it doesn't help that Sarah and Jennifer, who I work with in the morning, are very short. They stand on boxes if they're standing next to me, and they still look short. So, but it's hard to tell when you don't see like the full, perspective as to like what people's heights are. So that's what number one is. People just, stare at me sometimes because they're like, "Is that him?" Like, because he's a lot taller in person. But yeah, so that's, but in most cases, like, I love talking to people that I don't know, and it like, it reminds me of what what I'm doing makes a difference, and people like to have a good start to their day, start with a smile, start with lighthearted stuff, and that's what we hope to do. And so when people tell me that to my face, or send a message or something, that they appreciate what I do, that means a lot.
That's awesome. I mean, the UP is just such even though it's a wide mileage, we're such a small kind of small knit community, very close knit. Um, and you were talking a little bit before about the anchors that have moved to the area, and you yourself also have done a lot of things to kind of ingrain yourself into that community. One of the things that I think is really cool that you've done in order to keep music in your life really is you're involved with the Marquette Symphony Orchestra, right?
Yep. Yeah. Right now, I'm actually the president of the symphony board, and play in the cello section, which I've done since I was a sophomore in high school. But now I get to be involved with it from like the administrative, the board side, deal with operations and fundraising, and some of the programming, concert choices.
Sure.
Um, so that's special to be. Those are some of my favorite days are when we can put on a symphony concert and Phil Kaufman and bring in people from that that maybe know me from different parts of my life, and then come in like, oh, I didn't realize you played cello, and that's like, oh, that's actually like one of the biggest things that I do,
Yeah,
but not everyone sees that, and so it's cool to be part of something that brings people together like music does.
absolutely. I know at one point you were also on the board for the Children's Museum too. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, so I do a lot with the Children's Museum. Um, that obviously gave a lot to me when I was growing up, and so I like to give back. And um, Nina's a person you can't really say no to when she asks you to be a part of something, and so that's a really special place in Upper Michigan. And so I'm involved with the Children's Museum. I also am. I just finished my first year as a co-chair for the United Way, Marquette County campaign, which that was something Um, there's 25 partner agencies that work with the United Way, and I didn't know that much. You thought by name what these agencies do, but you really don't know the work that they do. That is not necessarily um, easy to talk about, and for some of those agencies, and so for me in the co-chair role to get out there and try and get people to donate to the capital campaign was something new and something I really enjoyed this past year, going out to different businesses and giving them a pitch to donate something out of their paycheck every week.
Hmm.
um, that was cool.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on United Way. In my time that I spent living up in Marquette County, being on the community investment panel was one of the most rewarding and kind of eye-opening experiences that I had. So I can't say enough good things about the United
Yeah.
Way. So kudos to you for helping out with that cause. Um, so to shift gears a little bit here, obviously right now the with all this coronavirus stuff is kind of at the top of the list of of dominating news right now. um, you recently were able to interview Governor Whitmer, correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've talked to her about, I think I've done 4 interviews with her, one-on-one over Skype or Zoom or something like that. Um, and so we've gotten to talk. The latest one was 2 weeks ago now. So, as her schedule changes, her openings change. But we definitely, I think, right off the bat, started with a good relationship of how to get, information to people watching TV6 who maybe don't know as much as what's going on in Lower Michigan or other parts of the country and the world. So I think that was a good start to our coverage, and we've definitely kept it going. We get a lot of questions from people like about um, they want to know more about the positive cases that we're telling people about, but we have very limited information that's released to us. And and I think what the health experts want people to realize is, you know, you should just that's why you gotta stay home, is because, you know, the virus is out there more than it can be detected because of testing. And so if you stay home, you're doing as much as you can. You're doing your part to keep yourself safe, and then not spread it too if you have it. So it's been a challenging time as far as what information is available and what information people want versus what message the health experts want them to hear. So we're balancing that all the time, and obviously with this outbreak, there's been a lot of concern about the economy, of course, and so there's questions. I did a media meet show about small businesses and unemployment and just the essential versus non-essential business determinations. And there's just a lot of questions, and it's rewarding that people are turning to us and want us to get the answers and expect us to get the answers. And I think we are definitely doing our job right now to get people what they want. But there are limitations that it's hard to explain, as far
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
what can be out there.
Do you find yourself kind of seeking out more feel good, good news type stories to, you talked about that balancing act because of obviously there's a lot of bad news out there on a daily
Yeah,
basis. So do you find yourself trying to seek out those good news stories?
there is, but you know what? We've always done a good job, I think, at TV6 of highlighting the good news in,
I would
just
agree.
a small act of kindness. Um, people are people think of us when like they see something out there, like, oh, this is going on, or I saw this, and they call us, which that's how we get most of our stories. That's how we get most of our good stories is people just call us or send us an email, you know. Um, and so we don't we don't know all the good that's going on unless people tell us about it, because there's only so many of us, and we're you know in one part of the UP mostly. So that's like the one thing that sometimes people call us like, why didn't you do a story about this? It's like, well, if you would have told us, we probably would have been there, but we need a heads up. So that's what we love to highlight the good that's going on, and it's more important now than ever, to remind people of all the goodness that there is, even in a time of crisis. But it can't happen unless people tell us about things or send us a picture. I think one thing that's changed about our jobs now that probably needed to change was we're more willing to adapt. Like, people can send us a picture of something that happened and we'll put it on the air now. We'll do interviews over Skype. Um, we'll just take people's videos that they send to us and make it part of a story, because of social distancing and other reasons. We're not sending reporters out to stories like we used to, and so now we're getting to see some of that firsthand uh, content come in and using that to our advantage, and
For
which is
sure.
pretty cool.
Yeah. What would you say that you enjoy most about covering news in the UP? What's your favorite thing?
um I just think I just love telling people what's going on, and just finding a good story and making being that voice for someone, and being the first to tell them about it. I think that's just you meet an interesting person and find out their story really hasn't been told, and you can be the person to um, put that story out there, whether it's a serious thing like I did a number of stories about a year ago about suicide prevention and new efforts in Marquette, and obviously I just felt like I could you know pour a lot of my energy into that and just try to get people to really absorb it, and who are watching. Or I did a series a year ago also. I was out on a Navy aircraft carrier for a couple of days, and I got to see what life was like firsthand for these Navy sailors, and to have that responsibility and that opportunity to you know share that with people in the UP, who maybe were in the Navy or maybe have known nothing about the U.S. military relatively. So that opportunity to just share a story with someone for the first time is so cool.
Well, I've got to say we've pretty much checked off every single box that I had here of stuff that I wanted to talk with you about. Is there anything that you felt like I left out, or anything else you want to kind of add to the
Yeah.
combo?
So the one thing that we talked about 2016, the beginning of the election season there. There was a Friday night in August when and I knew for a couple of days that Donald Trump, the candidate, was coming to Green Bay for a rally, and I'd have a chance to interview him after.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to like leave the rally early to get backstage to get our stuff set up, you know, because he would do his speech and then he would come off and sit down into the interview, and then he had to obviously move on, travel. So we were backstage in a room with a couple of his staff members, and then I had 2 videographers with me, and his staff kept saying he's going to want to stand up because, you know, he's pretty tall, and you know, when you're tall, you want to stand up. So, but I said, you know I'm taller than him, and like I would imagine he's not going to want to stand up standing next to me, you know, because people look up, you know, and it just doesn't look good on TV when anyone's looking up, you know,
Right.
their eyes looking up. So so I kept saying, no, like he's going to want to sit down. And his staff said, no, he won't. I said, all right. So he walks in the room. Obviously he's on a schedule. We have all of our lights set up, everything's set up. And he walks in and he's like, oh, we got a basketball player here. Let's sit down. And so like, I, you know, tried not to give everyone a look like I told you so, but like we've got to scramble and redo all of our lighting. And cause he doesn't, you know, he's on his own schedule, you know, we gotta start, you know, so we quickly redid everything, set up the shots, and did an interview in about 7 minutes, and then that was it. Shook his hand, and he left. So that was one thing I'll never forget. You know, it was just like it was a long day, kind of leading up to it, because it happened probably like 10:30 that night.
Sure.
We saved it for the next morning because at that point it was like, you know, we'll just edit this and make it look good. So that was a long day, memorable day for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely a cool story. Definitely one that you can always kind of take with you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my last question for you is the same one that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, as I kind of always wrap things up. And that's, how do you like your pasty?
Usually a lot of ketchup. And
Okay.
a lot of ketchup. Usually if I want a pasty, I go to Cal's.
Cal's? Okay, yeah, I was gonna say you're a South Marquette guy. Got to get one from Cal's.
So go to Cal's, get a pasty, get a cookie or 3 cookies, and just eat it with a lot of ketchup. I think, and that's like obviously I grew up with the ketchup. I don't think I knew about gravy and pasties until like, you know, I was like into college, but
yeah.
And I've tried it and it's good, but I think just ketchup. I like ketchup, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I guess how would you rate my my interview skills coming from the pro? How would you give me on a 1 to 10 scale?
I'll give you a 10 because you know you just kept the conversation going. You didn't ask any like, or, you know, repeat questions. You didn't ask any like yes or no questions. You know.
Yeah.
That's what we got. That's what we're trying to teach people is, you don't know yes or no questions. You gotta get that emotion out of people. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's a high compliment coming from you. But thank you very, very much for coming on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Talk to you later.